Welcome to Thinking Like a City, Episode 2, The Philosophy of Sidewalks. Imagine a wide, smooth sidewalk stretching out before you. It leads to a wonderful place with no obstacles, no broken gaps to hinder your freedom of movement. You reach an intersection, and now you have a choice to go in several directions. And with each new intersection of the sidewalk, new destinations become available to you. Suddenly, you value this ribbon of concrete keeping you safely separated from the road and its dangerous vehicles. You can't wait to explore this sidewalk, this never-ending Mobius strip of movement and liberty. Because sidewalks are free and safe, they provide you the opportunity to go where you want. As long as you're on a sidewalk in the public space, you can freely choose your destination. I'm making the assumption that you are a pedestrian in this scenario, because freedom can also be freedom from something, say needing a vehicle to access work, public spaces, libraries, and civics. Sidewalks open the possibilities of the city to every individual, rich or poor, gifted or average in intelligence, conservative or liberal. When you come to an intersection, you can go left or right, so long as the shared infrastructure is there. It seems good to all of us that sidewalks and crosswalks and signage should be designed to be accessible to all. Sidewalks are a simple but powerful example of how infrastructure facilitates choices. Our tax dollars, when used wisely for the good of all, increase the amount of democracy for all. You can test how democratically designed your city is by going for a walk. Observe how people come and go through an intersection or a plaza. People watching is fun, and now you're doing a sociological thought experiment too. John Stewart Mill wrote the highly influential essay on liberty, and when you hear the term liberty, what do you think of? Freedom? Choice? Let's define the terms. Liberty is freedom from restrictions and outside authority. Freedom is power to act. Free will. Let's assume you have free will. You make conscious choices that determine your destiny. You choose your ethics, you decide what actions to take, and you accept the consequences. Take all that philosophy and put it into the physical form of a city. How does the form, the design, reflect your philosophy? Does the very infrastructure facilitate your free will, or are your choices determined? How do you view what is possible? Say you want to walk to the grocery store. You could take a straight line and cut through your neighbor's yard, violating their private property. You could walk in the road, even along the curb, but you are still in the road and therefore in danger of being struck by a vehicle. Maybe you could walk in the grass alongside the road. All of these are possibilities. If we have free will, then we can choose the path we take. The limit to our choice is the means of transportation and the alternative possibilities expressed in the walkability of the city. Agent causation, agent choice. You are morally responsible for your choices, but how much of your behavior is dictated by the environment? Free will requires other possibilities. If you're a pedestrian, then the quality of the path, its accessibility to all people, legally and by its very physical design construction, becomes a deciding factor in how robust your freedom is to pursue. As a free man, I have the natural right to walk in the city. The sidewalk is a way to do it safely, and it is the freedom and safety provided by the city infrastructure that makes something as simple as a concrete sidewalk so important. The determinism that results from the designs of infrastructure lays the responsibility on the city and the complex systems, the hard decisions leaders make. Hard decisions about expensive, long-term projects that may get higher priorities than the lowly sidewalk. And yet that sidewalk is exactly where someone is walking to school, to work, to City Hall, where they cast their vote. Does the infrastructure play a causal determining role in your choice of actions, especially to move through the network of streets and to reach your destination? Does lack of infrastructure cause a physical impediment to your agency? It seems like we have the choice to walk wherever we want. But if you dig deeper, we find factors in the built environment that rule out most options. Even though you are a moral agent, free to think your own thoughts and set your own goals, Your ability to enable those goals is determined by the resources available in your environment. For this discussion, those resources are transportation through municipal infrastructure. It's hard to say. How much control do we have over what we do when we take into account external factors? Consider this quote by Patricia Churchland. Quote, "Asking, 'Am I free?' is really the wrong question. Instead, we should be asking, 'How much control do I have?' And the more control we have, the more responsibility we also have." End quote. Is your decision the result of a non-physical event? Your choice to go to the library is. Yet your decision to walk safely on a sidewalk is enabled by decisions made through city leaders. If they decide not to install sidewalks, then your choice is limited by physical events that preceded your walk to the library. We have used free will as a way to elaborate on the positive aspect of freedom, the ability to make choices and to act. Now we turn to liberty, and a classic place to look is John Stewart Mill's book-length essay on liberty. You, as a person who has liberty, are free to make choices about what to do or what to say. A primary purpose of government of the United States and other constitutional democracies is to protect and promote the liberty of individuals. John Stewart Mill is thinking deeply to answer the following question: on what grounds may the government interfere with our liberty? Mill's question is one of legitimacy, not of power. There is a difference. The state has the power to interfere with us. This question of power gets into the positive and negative aspects of freedom and the relationship of the state to the individual. Mill offers the answer of the harm principle. The only legitimate ground for social coercion is to prevent harm to others. Note, harm does not mean offense. Okay, Mill is grappling with a crucial philosophical question, but let's bring it down to the level of a simple, real-life situation to see the concept in practice. The sidewalk is a means of liberty, the freedom of transportation for pedestrians. When on the sidewalk, how may the government legitimately restrict your freedoms by imposing or enforcing laws? The convention in America is to walk on the right side of the sidewalk and not obstruct other pedestrians. An example of acceptable behavior is you can stand on a sidewalk and take pictures with a camera. But in some places, if you set up a tripod or other equipment, that becomes an obstacle impeding other pedestrians. Then you might need a permit. What about offensive behavior? Can you stand on a street corner and shout your opinion or even foul language? What other potentially offensive behavior can you think of or remember experiencing while out in the public place? When should the government, city laws, and codes impose on these behaviors or be enforced by police officers? Always? Never? Only sometimes? A legitimate question is raised by the positive and negative dimensions of freedom. What behavior of mine interferes with your right to simply walk down the sidewalk? What is the proper scope of criminal law? On Liberty offers a way to answer these questions: the harm principle. We should consider how our choices impact those around us. If we cause harm to others, the government has the power to intervene. The government should not impose legal consequences for actions that only harm oneself. The limits of liberty. John Stewart Mill distinguishes self-regarding actions from other-regarding actions. Self-regarding actions directly affect only the individual performing the action. Only in cases of other-regarding actions does Mill think society has the right to intervene. How did we jump from walking down a sidewalk to criminal law? Don't we live in a civil society? Why do the police have to come out and enforce the law? A civil society works if voluntary. I acknowledge your rights while you acknowledge mine. I have empathy for you, and you see things from my perspective. All the great moral teachers have reached this reciprocal mutual respect as the ethical conclusion. You can trace this idea through the history of political philosophy as natural law. When we are left alone, do we act this way toward one another? Social institutions, structure and function. Infrastructure is the foundation for action, and so the foundation of choice. The very design makes action and choice possible. It supports the community. especially when it meets the community's needs, though not in a way a communist state is obligated to provide for its people. Infrastructure facilitates opportunities for us to provide for ourselves. A sidewalk is a concrete footpath of choice, usually raised above the street by a curb for safety. The physical form of the city, such as sidewalks, crosswalks, and traffic signals, create the identity of the urban fabric because, as we have discussed, the choices they offer shape our choices. Our identity is linked to the identity of the places we live. Do you think of sidewalks as something that has to be designed? Do you think of it as an element in the system of the city, or perhaps as a system in itself? The well-maintained sidewalk leads to the common advantage. You may not know the specific laws pertaining to the sidewalks in your city, but you expect the law to protect all persons equally. Rich and poor have the same access. The sidewalk in a democracy is a shared path of equals. As a counter-argument, consider what would happen if the sidewalks were taken away. Without the safety of pedestrian movement, only those with automobiles would have transportation, because without sidewalks, it would be more difficult to reach a bus stop. You would either have to trespass on private property or walk amid vehicle traffic in the street. If you feel this entire episode has not been relative to you because you live too far from the center of business, culture, and civics to walk to them, then I leave you to contemplate the cost you pay for sprawl. This is a presentation on the benefits of proximity. A sidewalk is a system of transportation that is provided by the taxpayers and executed as infrastructure. The very simplicity of this freedom and simplicity of infrastructure is why I'm pointing it out so that it's not neglected. Sidewalks are the answer to the problem of dispersal for those who wish to return to a balance of density, where the functions of your city can be reached by the standard of walkability. Some people are rethinking suburban living and its commute in favor of mixed-use neighborhoods with greater options for density and diversity, and so more community. There are also health benefits to less driving and more walking, as well as economic benefits of participating in smaller local market systems. As to bicycles and public transportation by bus and train, I say they multiply the argument presented in this podcast. The greater the freedom of inexpensive mobility, the greater the economic gain. The greater the investment in infrastructure and services, the greater the freedom of mobility. This is a positive feedback loop. Infrastructure and public services are meant to offer something for everyone. The taxes of the city can be used in a way that all of its citizens are free to use. Get this system right, and we have utilitarianism and democracy. The design of a sidewalk influences your freedom to go where you want. With a well-made sidewalk, the city is yours. In conclusion, it's like John Stewart Mill said, local government should protect the liberty of the individual by building good sidewalks. Okay, he didn't say that, but I'm making the point that philosophic ideas need to manifest in infrastructure and in design. The design of the city is the epigenetics of our soul. The built form around us shapes our thoughts and emotions. This is where city government can become a positive feedback loop, collecting taxes that provide sidewalks that actually make citizens more free, empowers those citizens to be more successful so they can pay more in taxes and the city can provide even better infrastructure and services, and the positive cycle continues. I don't like paying taxes any more than you do, but the taxes you do pay, you want them to create something of real value, like freedom of movement and accessibility to all. We get mad when our taxes are wasted. Along with corruption, that's a negative feedback loop. Since we are thinking like a city, we have been looking at how a component like infrastructure is part of a complex system of economy, transportation, and human rights, while never forgetting the psychology of how the design, even of a sidewalk, makes us feel. Does it make us feel safe, included, free? Freedom is abstract. Sidewalks are, well, concrete. Let's look at an actual quote from John Stewart Mill. Quote, "I regard utility as the ultimate appeal on all ethical questions." End quote. So go for a walk. Self-assertion and self-development are right outside your door. Go for a walk and appreciate where the sidewalk takes you and the choices it opens. We'll leave you with some critical thinking questions. Considering the difference between free will and determinism, does your city provide alternative possibilities expressed in its walkability? Do the laws of your city constrain the conduct of private individuals while in the public space? Where do individual limits on behavior end and law begin while in the public space? In the city where you live, are the sidewalks and crosswalks maintained well enough to walk to your destination? Freedom can be free will, and it can be liberty. And it can be the freedom to not do something. Do you ever want to not drive? Is the idea of a walkable neighborhood appealing to you? Thinking about moral competence, what ought a city prioritize as a course of action? Do you agree that sidewalks are an economic, environmental, and equitable use of our resources? Does the infrastructure of your city take into account future trends, both in demographics and technology? What is the role of infrastructure in providing opportunity to disenfranchised citizens? Thank you for listening to Thinking Like a City.